There was an attack on a synagogue in Carmel, Indiana. Tony Katz today on Facebook, Tony Katz Radio. That synagogue is my synagogue. Carmel, Indiana is an absolutely beautiful place. It's got its crazinesses like every other place in America, but it's beautiful. They built an incredible city north of Indianapolis. The synagogue had someone come by and engage in vandalism, a swastika, and 2 iron crosses. That's what they had painted on like an out parcel. It covered a dumpster. They had actually found the people who did this because these 2, man and woman, husband and wife team, it turns out, actually bought the spray paint at like a Walmart or a Home Depot when they were caught on the videotape buying the stuff. When the authorities caught up to them, the stuff was in their car still. These weren't smart people. They got sentenced to 3 years in prison. And when I read they got sentenced to 3 years in prison, I said, how in the world does vandalism like this, not that I approve of it in any way, not that it isn't anti-Semitism, not that it wasn't meant to go after Jews, 3 years in prison. Well, you learn that not only were they planning the defacing of the synagogue, they were planning to firebomb the synagogue. And not only were they planning to firebomb the synagogue, they were planning to firebomb the home of the Rabbi Ben Sendrow, who joins me right now in studio. There's a part 3 to this story that involves Ben Shapiro, and I want to get into that with you, but let's start with the basics. When did you know, because we share cigars, you didn't tell me this one.
No, we weren't supposed to disclose that detail.
When did you know that you were one of the targets of attack?
Early on in the investigation, the FBI advised us that the former Mrs. Brewer, who, by the way, did not get prison time, she only got probation.
Okay, this teenage wife of his.
Right.
She didn't get, Nolan Brewer is the person who got 3 years in prison. She did not get prison time.
That's correct.
So you got notified early on in the investigation that you were a target. What did they tell you?
The FBI said that one of the witnesses they questioned mentioned that part of the plan was to firebomb my home and that they had found my address online and for whatever reason didn't follow through with it.
Now, they also didn't follow through with really what their first part of the attack was, as the reporting is out there. And if you take a look, and I have it in front of me, from the United States District Court, Southern District of Indiana, the sentencing memorandum, they got spooked by the security at the synagogue, Congregation Shaarei Tefillah, and that's when they decided to go around back, and that's when they decided to engage the vandalism there.
That's right, and that's also what dissuaded them from following through with their plan of breaking in and burning a swastika into the floor with homemade napalm.
Now, you people might not know this about you. You rose to fame, if you will, for being my rabbi. And then,
That's right.
And then you rose to fame because it was just days after the shooting at Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh when President Trump was right here in Indianapolis to speak. And it's Shabbat, it's Saturday, and your phone keeps ringing from a 202 area code. And as you have told the story, you thought it was a friend who was sick, and you actually picked up the phone.
Right.
Not a normal thing for you to do.
Not a normal thing for me to do. It was actually the day of the shooting.
Oh, that's right. Oh, my gosh, you're correct. It was the day of the shooting, and it was the White House asking you to come down to Bankers Life Fieldhouse, where the Indiana Pacers play, where this event was taking place that the president was speaking at, to offer a prayer.
Correct.
And a lot of notoriety, and I thought you did a truly terrific job on that day. Was there any relation to that event and why these 2 people from a place, a small town in Indiana, about an hour and a half away from where Carmel, Indiana is, was there any relation between the 2 things about you doing that in such a high-profile manner and why they chose Congregation Shaarei Tefillah?
Not that we know of. What they said to the FBI was that they heard there were a lot of ethnic Jews at Shaarei Tefillah. No one seems to know what they mean by that, including them.
Correct. When you and I didn't know what they meant by it. When you read from the sentencing memorandum, the quotes attributed to them, they do not sound like bright people at all. Didn't really have a value system, didn't really have an ethos, didn't really understand the supremacist type style rantings that they were engaged in. They were just ranting, and you've spent time in law enforcement. Have you seen this kind of stuff before?
I've always said there's two kinds of criminals. The ones that if they apply themselves to a lawful pursuit would be successful. And then there are the types of idiots who go into a rob a bank and they're asked for ID and they hand over their driver's license. And these seem to fall into the latter category.
You know, we laugh a little bit about it, but they really wanted to destroy a synagogue. They actually put planning into this homemade napalm, these homemade bombs that they had. I don't want to go into too much detail, give anybody any ideas.
Right.
But they had really gone about trying to get this done. Has there been any discussion of whether or not there are others like them? Because they were in chat rooms. They were engaged with some of these supremacist websites. Is there any conversation about how, is there anybody else who they were able to catch who was trying to follow in their footsteps?
There was conversation about it. It appears as though they were not part of any larger organization here in Indiana. They were talking, as you pointed out, in a chat room, if that's what they're still called, on something called Discord, which I learned from my son was originally a place for gamers to meet, but you can establish your own chat rooms, and she hooked up with a particular individual whose name I'll leave out. It's only a screen handle anyway. And he was the one who was extremely anti-Semitic and encouraged the wife, Kiyomi, to pursue this kind of activity. Talking
to Rabbi Ben Sendrow of Congregation Sharei Tefillah in Carmel, Indiana, which was the victim of an anti-Semitic attack. He himself, the target of that same attack. They wanted to also target his home, and also, full disclosure, my synagogue, my rabbi. The story got a little more sensationalized over the weekend, over the Memorial Day weekend, when Buzzfeed News ran a headline: an Indiana man who vandalized a synagogue with Nazi symbols admitted how far-right figures radicalized him. The article then goes on to quote, here it is right here. According to Nolan, this is the quote, Nolan being the man of the husband and wife who engaged the attack.
That's right.
She, meaning the wife, began with right-wing yet mainstream views such as those presented on Fox News. This is how they describe how these two got radicalized. She then moved on to writing by Ben Shapiro and articles on Breitbart News, which bridged the gap to the notorious white supremacist and anti-Semitic propaganda site Stormfront. You can go through the entirety of the sentencing memorandum, and Ben Shapiro's name does not come up once. Not once. This comes from some statement from a lawyer, not part of anything within the sentencing memorandum. Some lawyer decides that Ben Shapiro is the problem here, and BuzzFeed News writes about it like it's fact. Ben Shapiro is an Orthodox Jew?
Practicing Orthodox Jew.
Ben Shapiro is an unbelievably popular guy on the political right. Facts don't care about your feelings. That's Ben Shapiro. A series of books that he has written, all that become number one on the New York Times bestseller list. Ben Shapiro is a guy I have interviewed and you have read the columns of, and has never once in anything he has done ever hid his faith. When we say practicing, we mean practicing. And during the 2016 election, nobody was more out front in dealing with the alt-right than Ben Shapiro, and taking those slings and arrows. When you first heard this story, because I thought I was the first person to email you this story. No, other people had shared with you this story.
Correct.
When you read it, what did you think?
Linking Ben Shapiro to an act of anti-Semitism is laughable. The only way that you can connect Ben Shapiro to anti-Semitism is if you decide you hate Ben Shapiro, and Ben Shapiro is a Jew, and then you extrapolate, therefore I hate Jews. You're correct. We sat through a 5-hour sentencing hearing. Ben Shapiro's name was never mentioned. In fact, the attempt was by the defense attorney for Mr. Brewer to paint him as a totally decent person who had been radicalized by his wife. By his wife. Only by his wife. The rest of this stuff, I guess he came up with it too late after the sentencing hearing. Not that I think it would have changed anything.
Well, this statement, I mean, first, Fox News, Ben Shapiro, Breitbart. I'm not employed by Fox News, but I've appeared on Fox News many times. You, sir, have appeared on Fox News as well, talking about a host of subjects. Is there anything about Fox News that you have ever thought to yourself as a rabbi that is mainstreaming some type of anti-Semitic thought?
Never once. Never once.
Has there? I don't know if you read Breitbart News. Has there ever been anything there that you've thought is mainstreaming some type of anti-Semitic thought?
I don't read it on a regular basis, but I've never seen anything anti-Semitic on it when I have read it.
Right. I have said many times that back in the day when Andrew Breitbart was still alive, I did write pieces for the site. I was never employed by Andrew Breitbart. Certainly the days of Steve Bannon were not my days for Breitbart, and that's when I kind of pushed it to the side. But they were people who employed Ben Shapiro. They are people who employ Joel Pollack and a host of other people. They certainly did things to get clicks. I'm never going to say no to that. That they were engaged in proactive anti-Semitism is something that I would find completely laughable. Like I would find it completely laughable that Steve Bannon was anti-Semitic. You can say a lot of things about the man. That's not one of the things
not one of them
that you can say. But I want to get back to this about Ben Shapiro because it is something else for Buzzfeed to go about saying a guy who clearly is Jewish, a guy who is clearly open about his Judaism, to say that somehow his views are radicalizing people to this type of attack. It goes a little bit deeper, I think, than just a hate for Ben Shapiro. Am I wrong in that assessment, or do you have your own thoughts to it?
I think you're right. Ben Shapiro will frequently cite his Judaism as the source of his values. And to link him, as I said before, to anti-Semitism, there's a major disconnect there that I just cannot bridge.
Well, it goes to, I think, a larger question of where we are in America in terms of hate. One of the things I was discussing earlier is hate kills the brain.
Yeah.
Hate kills the brain, and it makes it makes smart people or normally decent people very, very daft and very, very ugly. This was an attempt not to smear Ben Shapiro for sure, but this was, hey, how many clicks can we get for our little piece here? And they utilized the attack on you, sir. They utilized the attack on our synagogue, and they utilized Ben Shapiro as a way to get clicks. What I want to know from you is, what do you think of that?
I feel taken advantage of, to say the least. I think that it demonstrates the level to which certain organizations and sources will sink for clickbait. I'm not sure what else to add to that, Tony.
Anybody aside from me? I mean, you said you got other emails about the article. Any other parishioners reach out to you, and what did they have to say?
They all had to say pretty much the same thing. We can't believe what we've read here, and we wanted to make sure you saw it.
I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you coming in.
Always my pleasure.
It's weird to do the shows that I do, and to have a story that is quite literally in your backyard with the people who you know and you've come to love and care about in this way. But I can't say it enough that hate, it kills the brain. And what we are all witnessing in our politics is absolute brain-killing kind of stuff. Things we know are untrue, things we know that are indecent, things we know that are impossible and implausible, getting pushed as the standard and acceptable and somehow newsworthy. Well, it's worthy of conversation, as if somehow this critical thinking idea is something that is of value. It isn't of value. This isn't critical thinking. What BuzzFeed News is engaged in here is nonsense and pablum. There is not a reason a sponsor is still on BuzzFeed News. There's not a reason that anybody who actually thinks of themselves as a good, decent person who wants to engage journalism still works for BuzzFeed News. There's simply no reason for it. You called it laughable, Rabbi Sendrow. It is wholly disgusting that anybody still thinks on any level and in any way there is something here that they should go back to work for tomorrow. Nothing, not a bit, not any part. They should simply say no. They should simply walk away, and so should their sponsors. And this will be the last time BuzzFeed gets mentioned by me. I'm Tony Katz.